One of our friends from across the street, I think Michael White, would like to introduce our presentation today. And maybe introduce yourself, tell us who you're with, and what you do, Mr. White.
I don't understand this response, but Michael White, I'm the executive director of the Kansas Contractors Association, and I feel like I'm amongst friends here today for some reason. But no, we're really excited. We're a state chapter, a member of the American Road Transportation Builders Association. Got it right. And actually, we belong to the organization for about the last 10 or 11, 12 years. They're a great resource for us. And Carolyn Simmons is here today. We asked her to come in, give you guys a presentation around what's going on, state funding, around motor fuels tax indexing, registration fees, as you guys have had a lot of conversation around that, other ideas that states are doing in terms of funding. So more of a resource as we move forward and start looking, we're halfway through Ike, and as we move forward, just what other states are doing. So Carolyn's an expert. This is what she does, follows these and these ideas at other states, and really is an expert in this area, and we wanted to give her an opportunity to talk to you guys today. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to introduce her. Thank you.
Welcome to the committee, Carolyn. Thanks for making that trip out. You flew in today and you're flying out tonight in this weather.
Hopefully.
Yep.
All right. Thank you guys so much for the invitation to be here today. I always tell people that the worst case scenario for us is that we do all of this research and then it just dies on our website. So I'm grateful to be here so we can share our information and have a conversation with you all about what other states are doing. And thank you so much for Michael for thinking of us for this event. We are so grateful for our partnership with Kansas Contractors Association and for the work they're doing in Kansas. So I'm going to share my slides. There's a lot of maps, a lot of pie charts. I know it's a lot to take in. You all have a copy. My contact information is at the end as well. I'm always happy to answer questions afterwards. All right. So I'm going to start things off by talking a little bit about the challenges in general that states are facing for their transportation revenue. Then we'll discuss a little bit about what states are doing to address those challenges and some of the trends that we're seeing across the country. So I included this slide just as a little overview of the big four buckets, as I call them, of what states are facing. So we're looking at the rising adoption of electric and hybrid electric vehicles. We all know that that is growing slowly nationwide, some states faster than others, but that trajectory continues to grow as we see more car manufacturers produce these vehicles and then become more accessible for the public and more charging stations become available. The biggest challenge right now that we're seeing, though, is that increasing fuel efficiency. So just passenger fleet vehicle wide, cars are generally becoming more fuel efficient. I'll go into a few of those slides next about those trends that we're seeing, but as you all know, the car that you buy this year, even if it's the exact same car that you've had in previous years, you know that the fuel efficiency has improved over time. So by upgrading your vehicle from a 2005 to a 2025, don't judge me, that's as old as my car, then you're gonna be paying less in the gas tax because your car is more fuel efficient. And that's just happening across the fleets. And that is not changing. Vehicle fuel efficiency is a desirable trait from consumers. And so we expect that to continue to grow and become an even bigger problem. Rising construction costs, I'll include a little bit more about this at the end, but especially during the COVID pandemic and after the COVID pandemic, we saw a big rise in highway construction cost materials. Again, that is a trend that is continuing to grow, and while we do see some differences between the different indexes that report these numbers, it is generally just going to continue to grow over time and really erode at existing revenue if that revenue does not grow as well. Which goes to the erosion of flat tax buying power. So the cents per gallon gas tax, that does not change. A flat tax in Kansas is the same as it was when it was approved in 2003. So that's 2003 money. It's 2025. We all know that that's only getting a portion of what it got in 2003. So looking at that flat tax and how you're able to help that grow over time is one of the biggest issues that states are facing. Sorry. Okay, so I have two slides here that are going to look at vehicle fuel efficiency. These are the NHTSA CAFE standards that were published in June of 2024. As you can see that there's a pretty aggressive timeline starting 2026 through 2031 to improve vehicle fuel efficiency. These are the regulatory issues. We know that real-world fuel efficiency doesn't quite track with that because it takes a long time for those older, less fuel-efficient vehicles to transition through the fleet and get retired. So I also like to include the EPA real-world vehicle fuel economy, where you can really see that growth in vehicle fuel efficiency over time. So a 2017 car, the average was about 29 miles per gallon. In 2023, it was just about 35 miles per gallon. So it's just vehicle fuel efficiency is desirable. People appreciate that in their vehicle, no matter what the vehicle is, and it's continuing to grow over time. So what are states doing to address these revenue challenges? I'm going to start off with the most obvious here, the motor fuel tax, the gas tax. Like we said, Kansas last increased their gas tax in 2003. You can look at this map to see we've seen 34 states approve or adjust to increase their state motor fuel tax since 2013. Some of those states have come back multiple times during that time frame. I also want to talk a little bit about how they're increasing their gas tax. So we have seen a shift. There are still many states that are doing a flat tax increase. A flat tax would be that flat cents per gallon that you pay at the pump. Many states still have that formula, but increasingly we're seeing states shift to a variable rate formula. A variable rate formula will look at the gas tax and adjust it automatically based off external factors. So you can see here, this is a list of some of those common factors that we see states index their gas tax to, so it grows along with those changes. Consumer price index remains one of the most popular ways, so that's the measure of inflation. 10 states index to the consumer price index. So that gas tax, when CPI goes up, the gas tax goes up as well. There are generally ceilings in place, so the gas tax doesn't rise too quickly, or a floor in place, so if inflation goes down, it doesn't drop too quickly. So you have some of those limits in place to make sure that things still stay in a reasonable change. But CPI has increasingly become one of those most popular ways to index their gas tax. You also see a lot of states index to the average wholesale price of fuel. That was very popular about 10 years ago. About 10 years ago is when we saw gas prices plummet a little bit. So while there were more states that indexed the average wholesale price of fuel, several of them transitioned off of that at that time. These things do tend to shift when gas prices go up. The average wholesale price of fuel will bring in more money. But some states found that to be a little bit unreliable for their planning, and they transitioned to other variable rate formulas. Meeting states' transportation fund needs. This is one of the more creative things, so I always like to highlight this because this is a little unusual, but very effective. We have 2 states where the gas tax automatically adjusts based off of the transportation construction needs. So New Jersey has just last year come back and renewed this formula. In New Jersey, they set their 5-year plan. The gas tax is supposed to meet the needs of that 5-year plan. If the gas tax is not meeting those needs, it rises. If the gas tax is generating more revenue than they need, it goes down. It's an automatic calculation done by their Department of Revenue every year, and it has helped them meet their needs at a time when they were really struggling, back when they were having a hard time making sure they could meet their match requirements. So that's one of the more creative ways that we've seen states look to index their tax. Changes in state population has come up. Corporate average fuel economy in Georgia is one of the factors they use. So we've talked about vehicle fuel efficiency. As vehicles become more fuel efficient in Georgia, the gas tax also increases slightly. And then probably the most popular topic right now is the National Highway Construction Cost Index or the Local Highway Construction Cost Index. So we have 3 states that have indexed their gas tax to highway construction cost materials. So it's very closely tied to use, something that really is a straightforward, easy explanation for why the gas tax is changing and has generated a lot of interest, especially with the National Highway Construction Cost Index going up so much in recent years. It's been generating a lot of interest from other states. Then we also have several states that have a general state sales tax on the purchase of gasoline at the pump. Not all of these states dedicate that sales tax to the transportation fund, which does become a little bit of an issue, but having that percent tax does also ensure a lot of growth going on forward in the future. And so, as I said, 24 states and DC currently have a variable rate state gas tax formula. Of the most recent gas tax increases, several of them have been variable rate formulas. We're seeing a lot of interest in indexing that gas tax to ensure that it grows and stays consistent over the years as people look for their long-term solutions. Electric vehicle registration fees, again, another extremely popular topic right now. We have 39 states that have an electric vehicle registration fee, including Kansas. The fees range quite a bit. We have 50 on the low end up to 290 on the high end from New Jersey this year. We have states that have also indexed these fees. So just like the flat gas tax, the problem with a flat single electric vehicle registration fee is that that amount never changes. So it's the same year after year, even though we know the buying power of that money is less year after year. So we have states that have indexed those fees. There are states that do a sliding scale based on the kind of vehicle. We have plug-in hybrid vehicle fees. And so this is definitely, as states look to the future and they prepare for that growth of electric vehicles, it's something that they're trying to put in place now. So 39 states right now, and of those states that do not have a fee, several of them have proposed legislation this year to put in a fee. So we do expect to see this number grow this year. And also, like Kansas, several states that have existing fees are coming back and revising those fees, either indexing them or increasing them.
Carolyn, and just I want to remind everybody on the committee, on this map, it says that our EV fee is $100. We're one of the few states that include our base registration in our EV fee. So we're actually, in comparison to most of the other states on this, we're at $60. And that continues to be a problem as we talk about these issues. So again, I just want to remind the committee of that.
That's a good point too, because these fees that I'm talking about are really entirely on top of base registration fees, not including. So $60 would be on the low end when you're looking at 50 to 290. Road usage charge programs. I know Kansas has done a lot of research on this topic, so I won't go into too much detail here. But we have 4 states that have enacted a road usage charge program. A road usage charge program, of course, is a way to tax drivers by miles driven instead of fuel used. This is very closely linked to the use of the transportation infrastructure system, and especially as states grow more concerned about the longevity of the gas tax because of that increasing fuel efficiency, because of the rise of electric vehicles, a road usage charge is becoming an increasingly popular topic to explore. But what's not talked about very much, and I really think needs to be talked about a lot more, is Virginia's highway use fee. I put that exclaimer there that it's a fuel-efficient vehicle fee. I'm going to go into some of the detail here. I know the formula is a little complicated, so I put it on the slide. But in Virginia, and I'm from Virginia. That's where I'm going home tonight. So I can talk for ages about this fee. We have our gas tax. Our gas tax is indexed to CPI. We have our road usage charge program that you saw before. The road usage charge program is voluntary. Like all these programs are voluntary, the road usage charges. So you have that option. You also have your highway use fee. The highway use fee applies to any vehicle that is fuel efficient in the state of Virginia. A fuel efficient vehicle, I'm going to refer to my notes a little bit here, excuse me guys, but this can get a little in the weeds. A fuel efficient vehicle is defined as a vehicle that's about 25 miles per gallon or better. So that's a significant portion of the population at this point in Virginia. So if you drive a fuel efficient vehicle, when you get your annual registration renewal, there's a line on there for your highway use fee. Your highway use fee is calculated by the average miles driven in the state, which has been 11,600 since the program went into effect. These multiplied by the fuel tax rate of that year. So,
And 11,600 is not the miles that the car drives, it's the miles that are driven in the state. Is that
yes,
correct?
statewide average miles driven for the entire state, not you individually, which will become an important point in a second. But the average miles driven in the state, they've calculated the average driver drives 11,600. You might drive more, you might drive less. That'll come up in a second as being important. Multiply that by the fuels tax rate for that year. So that is what the average driver would have paid in their fuel tax if they drove the average non-fuel efficient vehicle. So they take your car. What is your car's average miles per gallon? If you drive a fuel efficient vehicle, then you pay less per mile than a non-fuel efficient vehicle. They take, God, I know this can be a little complicated, but so they calculate how much you would have paid if you did the average miles in the states for your vehicle's mile per gallon. They take the difference between that and the non-fuel efficient vehicle, take 85% of that, and that is your highway use fee. This is a way to really try to capture that lost revenue of what you would have paid if you drove an average non-fuel efficient vehicle. You're paying less because you're driving a fuel efficient vehicle. You're paying less into the transportation infrastructure, even though you're driving the same amount of miles and using the same roads, same bridges. So you're paying less into the system. This is a way to try to bring some fairness to that. We have a Toyota Prius hybrid. So we're on the higher end of that fee. We pay, I think, like $90 a year for ours, be on the very high end of that fee. I've seen the average being more like $20 or $30 a year for an average fuel-efficient vehicle. And that comes to you for your vehicle registration. I know, this is a little complicated. And the other question is, what if you feel that you drive less than the average driver in the state? 11,600 might be the average driver in a more rural area, but in the urban areas where you take shorter trips, even if they are more frequent, you feel, realistic or not, that you drive less than the average driver, so you think you should pay as much. Then you opt into the road usage charge program and pay for the actual miles that you drive, and that's their solution. And this has actually worked very well in Virginia. The road usage charge program has been getting a lot of attention and getting a lot of people signing up as a way to try to save money instead of paying their highway use fee. I would love to take questions on that when we get to the end if we need to, but I know that's a pretty complicated formula. But one thing I really want to emphasize about this formula is that it works. And when I talk to the people that have been behind the creation of this formula, one of the first things they'll say is when I asked at our workshop this year, I asked them, well, why aren't more states doing it if it works so well? And he responded, why aren't states doing this? That's a good question. I don't know, because it is really working for Virginia. Fiscal year 24 estimates are looking at $61.8 million in revenue. Looking ahead to fiscal year 2030, when we expect vehicles to become more fuel efficient, they're estimating it's going to generate over $70 million in revenue. It's working for Virginia to try to capture that lost revenue from vehicle fuel efficiency that no other state is really going after right now in order to make sure that everybody's paying their fair share.
So, Carolyn, would you like to take questions on this now in case they have any?
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
that we
I
can
know that's a
stop.
lot that I just threw out there.
Does anybody have any questions on this? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is an interesting idea. I'm just wondering, I mean, we talk about, consumer choices wanting to have more fuel efficient vehicles. I feel like this almost like negates that consumer choice, or it creates a disincentive for that consumer choice to have a more fuel efficient vehicle. So I'm just wondering your take on that, and what's the general consumer feedback about something like this in Virginia?
Those are great questions. So that does come up a lot. When you look at electric vehicle fees, this highway use fee, that comes up a lot. Concerned that these fees disincentivize people because it takes away that savings. I would argue that the savings that at the pump are really more on the price of gas. The the state gas tax is such a small portion of what you pay at the pump. You're still saving a tremendous amount. You're still saving several dollars several dollars per gallon by buying a more fuel-efficient vehicle. What we're really looking at is trying to capture that 20 cents in the state gas tax that's being lost. And people still have a duty to pay their fair share for use of the transportation infrastructure. We know that revenue coming in isn't enough. We know we need to maintain our roads and bridges, and that's essential for state health and the economy. So asking people to pay what they would have paid, that 20 cents per gallon, I think is still very fair, and there's still tremendous savings by buying fuel-efficient electric vehicles on top of that. And then the other question about voter sentiment towards these fees. And actually, I can provide my anecdotal evidence because I'm in Virginia. And you guys, I'm in the worst of the worst on internet. I'm the local mom groups. I have 2 young kids, so I'm in all those local mom Facebook groups and Reddit subreddits and all of that, where they will complain about everything and start a fight over anything. And when the highway use fee first came out, it did come up in those groups. Someone asked, they got their registration. We pay a lot in vehicle registrations annually in Virginia on top of our local fees. Someone brought up, why am I paying this highway use fee? I already pay so much for my vehicle, and the roads are, not great. And people in the comments just were like, you know what? Pay what you need to pay. You're not paying your fair share. And I mean, people will pick a fight on anything in these groups, but the amount of people coming out in support of the highway use fee was pretty impressive, I felt, from my perspective. I was really surprised by how many people were actually in support of this fee, because for most people it wasn't that much money, and they really could see that direct connection. Virginia made it very clear this was going towards transportation funding, and they could see that direct connection to improving their roads and bridges, and felt that it wasn't that much to ask for. And also there was a little bit of heartburn, well, you drive a very fuel-efficient vehicle, so you could probably afford it, whereas I drive an older vehicle and I'm paying more than you into the system, so it's not fair. So that was there's lots of polling. I know that they've done a lot of work in Virginia to do research on the perception of this. The state DOT has done a lot of work on it, but from my angle, I was surprised by the support. Don't bring up the hot lanes, though. That's a different fight. Any other questions?
I was thinking that's a good point about saving money on fuel and that still being part of the consumer choice. It's something I hadn't thought about. So yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation that we've had so far. Very informative. So my question is, I understand that we're not capturing all the revenue that we thought we would capture because vehicles are becoming more fuel efficient. Do we have a chart somewhere of what we thought we would be capturing? And then is this money that we're now trying to capture with the HUF tax, quote unquote, and or the road usage tax, are we coming out above what we thought we were going to capture originally? Like, how is that comparing? Are we just filling up the bucket? Are we overfilling the bucket?
That's a very good question. I don't have that information on hand. That would be very specific to Virginia. I know when this legislation came about, this came out in 2020, it included a gas tax increase, the highway use fee, the road usage charge, all in one big bill. The bill came out because they were falling short of their revenue needs and their projections. That's why they changed the gas tax formula to CPI. That's why they added those things in. They weren't getting the revenue they expected to get. And they put the highway use fee in because vehicles were becoming more fuel efficient faster than they expected. And that was really where they felt they were getting dinged. I don't have the information about whether this is meeting what they expected from there, but I can pull that information and send that to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Helgerson.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The registration fee on the Virginia's fuel-efficient vehicles, that's done at the registration time, correct?
Yes.
So in essence, since you're not doing it on a gallonage basis, those cars that are driving through Kansas, you would not be collecting any additional money from them.
That's correct. That is the big challenge. The highway use fee is only good for residents. It's not going to capture any out-of-state revenue.
I didn't see in here any discussions about state general fund and the collection or the usage of state normal resources that Kansas relies very heavily on in order to pay for its system? How do other states use state general fund to the extent that we do?
There are many states that use general fund revenue through appropriations and bonding that gets paid back from the general fund. The challenges with the general funds can be a really great resource for transportation funding, especially to get projects going and to make sure the programs are continuing. It can be, if it's not reliable year after year, set amounts that are protected and set aside, it can make planning for the future challenging. And that's really where the holdup comes for some states.
Don't we use 14% or something like that? The state general fund our highways? 18%. Okay, 18% of the sales tax. Okay. Okay, I'll hold on the rest.
And I will go into a little bit later on the use of general and vehicle-specific sales taxes. That is a very, as states look to diversify their revenue coming in order to create many legs for their transportation funding stool, one of them that is increasingly being used is sales taxes. Like North Carolina did a really great job with constitutionally dedicating a portion of their state sales tax for transportation funding, and it has been a very reliable source of revenue for that state and has helped them diversify so they're prepared for any sort of changes in the future.
Carolyn, I had one question. Do you think that the pairing this registration fee with a road usage charge was an important part of getting the acceptance by people? It's like, I have choice.
It has been. I actually have friends that have chosen to go into the road usage charge because they had the option. They were going to pay their highway use fee or join the road usage charge program. And having that choice made the road usage charge program look more interesting to them. I think it's helped with the popularity of the road usage charge program from what I can see anecdotally in my neighborhood amongst my social circle. And I think it's also made the highway use fee a little bit more comfortable because then people can choose which they're going to pay.
And then when you look at all of these different cafeteria plans of options, you know, like one reason I like the sales tax in a sense as a funding source is the efficiency of the tax collection. You know, we're already or the registration fee, like what we've done. Do you know what the tax collection efficiency is for the state of Virginia on the RUC charge?
That's a great question. I don't have that information right now, but I can pull that information.
Questions at this point? Representing Minnick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any consideration given to the weight of the vehicles, like we do the larger classes of vehicles? More weight, to me, indicates a little bit more road wear. And then second question would be, within your power pool, what's the major source of electricity in the evenings when a full hybrid would be plugged in and charged? Is it in the urban areas or the rural areas?
So I'm not sure for the power sources. I don't have that information. And then for the vehicle weight fees, that's not calculated in the highway use fee because it's just a very set formula.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, go ahead. Did I miss someone over there? Okay, go ahead.
Great. If there are any more questions going forward too, that's my favorite part, is having this discussion with you guys. So please don't hesitate. Say. You don't know us. This isn't my first rodeo. Okay, so also a very popular topic, charging station fees. 8 states have enacted charging station fees. Several have introduced these fees this year. They are very easy to understand on paper. They are very hard to implement. So there have been challenges in many of those states that have enacted this fee of actually implementing it and collecting the tax, trying to figure out who's responsible for collecting the tax, whether the stations are equipped to collect the tax, making sure that they are all appropriately following the law. So there are several challenges, but it has become a very popular topic because it is very straightforward and easy to understand. And then other recurring revenues. These are all, again, things that we're hearing a lot from the states wanting more information. We have TNC fees, Transportation Network Company fees. That's those ride shares, Uber, Lyft, things of that nature. So a fee usually per ride, discounts for shared rides, things of that nature. Retail delivery fees. So we saw our first retail delivery fee passed by Colorado in 2021. Minnesota came back in 2023 and passed their own fees. And this, as we all know, shopping, at least in my household, has changed quite a bit since the pandemic. There has been a big increase in online orders, online shopping. A lot of those vehicle deliveries at that last mile have increased. So looking to make sure that that increased use of the roads and bridges is being captured. It has been a very popular topic. And at least for Minnesota, when they were looking at their fiscal estimates, again, it's one of those, their fiscal estimate on the bill thought to be making about $65 million annually. So it has generated a lot of interest from other states. And then we have tolling, of course, sin taxes that are being diverted to transportation funding, like Mississippi does sports betting, online lotteries, things of that nature, cigarette taxes in some states. Local or regional taxes, that is becoming a big part of our pie chart when I show you our 2025 legislation introduced so far. That'll be coming up in a few slides. That has grown over time, the interest in trying to bring the localities in as well into the transportation funding solution. And vehicle sales taxes, anything related to vehicles being used for transportation purposes. So I always, at the beginning of the year, I look at what we've seen in the past. I review what we're hearing states talk about for the future, and I put together some predictions on what states will be looking at in 2025, and we put together 4 buckets looking at this year. The first one is cleaning up transportation-related taxes and fees. So I already alluded to my shocking internet participation in the local mom groups. One of the things that has come up, and my ears are always perked for anything related to my job. You always want to hear what people are thinking. And one of the things that came up, I mentioned our vehicle registrations are quite high. And we have a local property tax on our vehicle that is extremely expensive. We have a very old car, and I think we still paid something like $200-something to our local government for owning our vehicle. And that's with a discount. If you have more than one vehicle, you lose that discount. So it's very high. And the roads in Alexandria leave something to be desired. We have a fair amount of potholes that we're learning to dodge. And so it came up during that vehicle property tax time of year. This is ridiculous. We're paying several $100s per households. And look at the state of our roads. Look at this. How are we supposed to drive our kids to school? How are we supposed to get to work when we're constantly hitting these potholes? That fee doesn't go to your local roads. That doesn't go to anything related to transportation. That goes to your local government's general funds. And that becomes a big challenge for people that are looking to really improve their local infrastructure. If all of these fees are being assessed and voters feel so heavily burdened by these taxes and fees, how do we ask for more? So what some states are doing are cleaning up all transportation-related taxes and fees. So I mentioned vehicle sales taxes on parts related to vehicles, those local property taxes on vehicles, all of these transportation-related taxes and fees, making sure they're going towards transportation purposes. I also mentioned diversifying revenue streams. So the general sales tax, for instance, in North Carolina is a great example of that. Trying to build out a multi-legged stool. During the pandemic, when people stopped traveling and gas tax revenue plummeted, states that relied heavily on gas tax, like neighboring Indiana, for instance, felt a pretty big shock to their system when they realized that revenue wasn't there anymore that they had expected to be there. So trying to really build out the toolbox of what's going to your transportation fund. So if there's a shock on one end, like travel decreases, or electric vehicles suddenly go through a boom, or any of these things, a recession, or any of these things that are a possibility, making sure that your transportation fund is solid and prepared by having a diverse revenue stream coming in. Long-term recurring revenue. So we're seeing states increasingly talk about their transportation funding plan in the short, mid, and long term. Short term is we have a shortfall now. What do we need to do to solve that shortfall now? And so that's when you see gas tax increases come up, electric vehicle registration fees, things of that nature. Long term, where do we see the state going? How fast do we see electric vehicle adoption and fuel efficiency, changing travel patterns, increasing freight? So keeping all these things in mind for the long term, how do we make sure to capture that revenue in the long term and make sure that everybody is paying into the system in an appropriate way and funding the needed improvements that are coming down the stream? And then the midterm is bridging that. So Virginia describes their highway use fee as the bridge. They consider their road usage charge program the long term, the gas tax index, the CPI, as the short term. So kind of creating that multi-pronged approach for transportation funding now and in the future. And then I mentioned electric vehicle related taxes and fees, 39 states. That number is going to grow this year. I think we'll see more states index those fees and states come back, revisit the existing fees and increase them. These are the states that we have seen introduce legislation so far. No legislation has passed yet, but we're seeing a lot of momentum. Mississippi and North Dakota, both moving pretty fast on gas tax increases. We see a lot of states looking at electric vehicle fees. And you can see in this chart the kinds of revenue that's being introduced so far this year. And then finally, I just look at some of the trends. These are the kinds of bills that have been introduced over the years. It's really comparing the even number years and odd number years are really what makes the most sense, because most states, even number years aren't going to be passing big bills, but odd number years, there are more opportunities. So you can really see some of that growth for non-fuel tax recurring revenue. That is a big variety of different taxes and fees that are not tied to the fuel tax. So sales taxes, vehicle sales taxes, things of that nature. It's a pretty wide group. Retail delivery fees, anything like that would fall into that category. And that's really where we're seeing a lot of interest. And then of course, just because a bill is introduced does not mean it's going to pass. So looking at the bills that have passed and some of the trends that we've been seeing year over year. And then this is something that I asked one of our economists put together just because I like to have this on hand. There have been a lot of questions about the rising construction costs and how that is impacting the industry. So this breaks out two of the big indices that we look at, the National Highway Construction Cost Index and the Producer Price Index. You can see a little bit of an unusual flip where the PPI was rising faster than the NHCCI. So they had to do some corrections with estimates, which then put them out of balance going forward. We think the reality is somewhere really in between these two as far as rising construction costs. And there's actually a discussion happening this week in Federal Highway about the National Highway Construction Cost Index. So we're going to be staying tuned in that conversation, and hopefully we'll have more information about the use of that index later this week. Okay, that's a lot of information, and I would love to take questions and have more conversation if anybody would like to discuss anything.
Does anybody have any questions? Representative Delperdang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question was, well, it looks like slide 14, you had TNC fees. What is TNC?
So that's the Transportation Network Company. So that's the rideshare fees on Uber and Lyft and things like that.
And then the other one, and I don't know if you would have this or not, it was slide 12. It says who pays, but it's looking at Virginia's fuel efficient, but fuel efficient vehicles, vehicle with combined fuel economy of 25 miles per gallon or greater, they pay the fee. I understand that. I purchased a car a couple years back and it was subject to the gas guzzler fee. What cars fall into that? Are we charging them if they're too efficient, and we charge them again if they're not efficient enough?
Is that a fee?
And I don't know if that was a state or a federal one. That was on one of my toy cars, but it was I want to say a $2,000 gas guzzler fee. Huh? Yeah, just mine. Huh?
It with the $2,000 fee.
Yeah,
lately?
it was a big V8 Challenger that I bought a few years back. But
did
it
you
was, I
get
think
the-
that was a federal fee, so it's like, we're gonna charge them if they don't get enough mileage, and we're gonna charge them if they get too much mileage. Is that what this is coming down to?
Well, I don't know, Representative. We can't control what the federal government does.
Yeah, I think I'm saying that was a federal, but I don't think that was a state.
I don't know of any state statute. I know a number of guys around this table that'd be trying to change that one. Yeah.
All right.
I'm sorry, I'm
hadn't
not
heard of
familiar
that,
with
though.
that fee. I only really focus on the state challenges.
I've never heard though of a gas guzzler fee. Representative Wilborn, have you heard of a gas guzzler fee? Are you
Yes,
responding
thank you,
to that?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the great presentation. This is more of an opinion. I feel like it's somewhat disproportionately unfair to rural areas where they have to drive a lot of miles just for day-to-day essentials. And then also the constant creep on senior citizens with fixed incomes. I know it's all part of the mix.
There has been a lot of research on the driving patterns of rural and urban drivers, especially looking at Caltrans, Washington State, things of that nature. They've done a lot of research on road usage charge programs. The general finding is that while rural drivers drive much farther distances, urban drivers drive more frequent, smaller trips. So it seems like it's kind of a wash as far as who drives more. And in general, rural drivers that drive more farm equipment and things of that nature are driving less fuel-efficient vehicles, whereas urban drivers might be leaning more towards more fuel-efficient or electric vehicles where the charging infrastructure is a little bit more common.
Back to you, Representative Delperdang. I think you got cut off. I thought he was going to respond to your deal. You have anything else?
I was just kind of intrigued on the mileage there. And I think the next representative over here kind of hit on the next thing I was gonna get at. You were showing 11,600 average miles traveled.
Mhm.
Rural Kansas, I don't know if that's realistic or not, so you hit on
Well, and then she also said that's what they estimate to be in-state mileage, not total miles driven also.
it. But think about what you do. How many miles do you roll in the state per year?
I got to drive farther to work than most people. but-
Yeah, you do.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation today. So on the retail delivery fees, does that include like your Walmart grocery deliveries?
So each of those two states has a list of exemptions. I have a great handout that I can pass on to you guys afterwards that lists all of the exemptions. Formula is an exemption for some of those medicine, groceries, things of that nature that can be included as exemptions, so you don't have to put a tax on those things if you don't want to.
Thank you. And then one more on the T&C fees. Does that incorporate like Uber Eats as well, or just Ubers?
So that is very, very much state and locality dependent. Some of them put it on anything to do with any sort of ride share. Some of them do provide exemptions, again, for things that are related to groceries or food or anything like that. There's also a lot of those localities will grant discounts for shared rides, for low-income riders, things of that nature.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just kind of curious about, so for the variable rate, say you did CPI logistically, did they just update that annually? Is it quarterly? What's kind of the common practice?
So in general, states will update their variable rate gas tax annually. Either January or July are usually the most popular times. There are some states that do it more frequently. There's one state that does it twice a year. There's one state, and this makes it real fun for my job, that does it 4 times a year. There is one state that does it every other year. So it varies a lot, but the most popular time frame is annual.
Let me ask one more. So I'm also curious about the RUC. We just recently got a presentation about the study that our Department of Transportation is doing, and I was curious, what's kind of been the feedback in Virginia, we heard about different ways of rolling out a program. If you wouldn't mind kind of just sharing high level, how does the RUC work in Virginia, and has it been successful so far?
Yes, the program has been, it's been very interesting in Virginia because you have the highway use fee as kind of an incentive to opt into the road usage charge program. It's been pretty popular. Unfortunately, I forgot to check what their current registration is, but for a while it was growing pretty quickly when it was first released. And overall, people that prefer to pay less are happy to do the road usage charge program because they feel like they're getting a bargain by opting into it. So because you have that option and that choice of whether you want to save money and pay per mile or whether you want to pay in the highway use fee, it becomes a lot more appealing. The one challenge to that is when you tie the road usage charge or any tax or fee and sell it as a savings to the driver, eventually we know that it's not going to be enough. So while that's a great incentive to start things off, that does become a little bit of a messaging challenge later on.
Thank you.
Representative Goddard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To tag along on the rural drivers, it's not uncommon for people in my part of the state to drive 30 to 45 miles to and from work every day. And that means people coming into my area and going out of my area for work. If you just take the 30 miles, one-way trip, 50 work weeks, okay, you're looking at 15,000 miles on vehicles. And add to that any other driving that they might do on weekends, et cetera. And I would say that you're probably pushing anywhere between 18 and 20,000 miles a year. So I think that needs to be factored into all of this. I know it's complicated and a lot of people don't drive that much, but I think it's important to recognize that fact.
Well, then if you were paying your highway use fee, you'd get a deal because it's 11,600 miles is the average. So you're going to be paying less than if you're being charged per mile. There are, for road usage charge programs, there have been discussions about putting caps on place, just like you do for the road usage charge program. So you could put, for instance, some states cap it at what you would have paid for your electric vehicle registration fee, something like that. So that way no one is extremely burdened because of where they live.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Representative Bohai.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for the presentation. Going back to the chart on page 4, the updated NHTSA CAFE standards with the model years and the MPG. So that's projected, right, to get to 55, or has that been mandated by a federal agency?
So that is what they published June of 2024. That can be changed. So that's something that we'll be keeping an eye on. That's what they are asking. And they have the document is quite long. It has a lot of different exceptions for where the manufacturer is, if it's international or national. There's a lot of different things that go into determining what they're asking that manufacturer to hit for their goals for fuel efficiency. That might change, but I think what really stands out to me is that next slide, which really measures the actual real world fuel economy. And you can see that that tends to really just grow regardless of what the NHTSA standards were, because overall there's just pressure on these manufacturers to increasingly create fuel efficient vehicles. They're not quite hitting the NHTSA standards that you see. Those are a little bit aspirational, but you can still see the overall growth.
Right. So on that one, it looks like it's increased by about 6 miles a gallon.
Yes, it's slower than what you see for the NHTSA standards, but that's the real world fuel economy of all vehicles.
So that's all. So it's not just cars. It's like the crossovers, the cars, the trucks.
No, I'm so sorry. That's for cars, but that includes some of the older cars as well. That's the whole picture of what's on the road right now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Just to clarify, the first chart is only new car sales, and the second chart is the fleet that's on the roads right now. Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Carolyn, for your presentation. It was very, very informative.
Thank you, everybody.
Committee, the next thing that I would like to do today is to work Senate Bill 8. That's the one that I think we heard last, I believe it was Thursday. It was the move over bill. It's a bill that passed in one shape or form or another 3 times last year, got over or around 100 votes every time, even after we kind of loaded it down with some stuff, which made it not get through the Senate. Chris, would you like to give a quick overview of the bill?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee Senate Bill 8 requires drivers to proceed with due caution when passing stationary vehicles. When those stationary vehicles are displaying hazard lights, road flares, or caution signals. A driver upon approaching a stationary vehicle displaying those lights, flares, or caution signals, including traffic cones, signs, or reflective triangles. If they're on a highway with at least 2 lanes going in the same direction, should change lanes away from the stationary vehicle with regard to road, weather, and traffic conditions. If the driver is not on a highway with at least 2 lanes or if changing lane would be unsafe, then the driver should approach with due caution and reduce speed with regard to road, weather, and traffic conditions. The bill creates a new penalty for violating the traffic infraction, which is $75, and that's placed in the uniform fine schedule. And the provisions would take effect on July 1, 2025.
Does anybody have any questions for the reviser? I would remind everybody this made it through this consent calendar in the Senate. So are there any amendments? Not, I'll recognize Representative Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to pass SB 8 out favorably and to put it on the consent calendar.
There's a motion by Representative Essex, second by Representative Helgerson. Is there any discussion on the motion? We're now open for discussion. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Received a picture while we were in session a little while ago of the dust blowing severely out west. Visibility was less than a couple hundred feet. This bill, as I see it, would make people that pull over because of the visibility is so bad to the right. If someone did not move over also and crashed into them, they could be ticketed under this bill. If one vehicle gets into next to a field that's blowing severely and the visibility is limited, and they pull far to the right and park it, the next vehicle that comes along and happens to hit them, this would be something that the second vehicle could be ticketed for, the driver. I know we say something about weather conditions and everything in there. Part of what I'm getting at is the discretion of officers and stuff within things. There's still, no matter what we pass, it's based upon officer discretion, and we can't solve everything. There are times when the visibility is so bad for whatever conditions. I just wanted to bring that up as a small comment. Thank you.
Representative Hoheisel. Any other comments? All right. Seeing none, Representative Essex, would you like to close?
I close.
All right. Everybody's heard the motion. All those in favor of passing SB 8 favorably signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, committee, we have nothing further today. Tomorrow, we're going to have a very long meeting. Your chairman kind of overloaded tomorrow, so I apologize for that. We're going to have a hearing on 2 license plate bills, 98 and 18, SB 98, SB 18, and then also a SB 97. Make sure you look at SB 97. It was amended extensively in the Senate. It says on the title that they can have the option to obtain a title. Let's see, that doesn't read like I was told that it was going to read. But anyway, read that very carefully. It was extensively amended in the Senate. And it passed 40-0 after the amendment, but it had they had to fix it a little bit. So if you have any concerns, make sure you read through the new bill. There's nothing further for the committee. We're adjourned.